Hi, this is Marsha.
And this is Kelly.
We are the two Ewes of Two Ewes Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at twoUsFiberAdventures.com.
And we invite you to join our Two Ewes Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode.
Good morning, Marsha.
Good morning. Do you have your coffee in hand?
I do, yeah.
I have my coffee in hand as well. Let me ask you this. Are you in your pajamas?
No, I'm dressed because as soon as we finish, I have to rush off to give a final.
Oh, okay.
So I'm up.
I'm in my bathroom.
Oh, well, I would be if I didn't have to go and give a final.
Yeah.
But I'm up. I'm dressed. I'm wearing wool.
Oh,
because this is
cold,
like the third straight day of rain in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cold. It was not even 60 yesterday.
Oh, good.
I know. So, but I'm trying not to complain. It was pretty nice this morning with all the drizzle just kind of pouring down. So I'm out in the trailer because I wasn't sure if Robert was going to be kind of, trying to get stuff done in the morning, and I didn't want to be in the way. So I just brought my coffee out here at the trailer. I'm looking out at the yard. It looks pretty, but this is not the right weather for May, almost June.
No.
But you guys have been having good weather.
Yes. I didn't want to say it, but yes, we're having lovely weather here. It's very nice. Yeah. So it was, I don't know what the temperature is, honestly, but it's pleasant. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And I'm going to, in fact, today I have to do a little picking up. Well, this is a little embarrassing. We went to the beach this last weekend, and I got home Sunday night, but I still have suitcases and boxes of, not the stuff that has to be refrigerated, but the dry stuff, that's still sitting around. So it's Wednesday.
Okay, Marsha, the last time we recorded.
Oh, yes.
was the beginning of May, and I was on my way to a work conference. Mm-hmm. I just yesterday unpacked the bag that had the knitting in it, and the suitcase is still sitting open in my vanity area of the bedroom. I have finally, just yesterday, got all the stuff out of the suitcase, but yeah. So...
I don't feel bad.
So I win. I win the slovenly contest.
Yeah.
Which, if you've ever talked to Robert, you would never even have tried to compete with me.
Yeah, no, I can't. I know you well enough to know that I can't compete with you. Anyway.
Oh, funny.
So I don't know. Why did I bring this up?
Stuff lying around. Weather.
Oh, I guess what I'm going to do today. I know about the weather. That was it about the weather. Is that I'm going to tidy up the house and finally put that stuff away, and then I'm going to go out and do a little bit of gardening. And then I have Thursday. The reason I had asked to record today is so that I have all day Thursday and Friday, which is going to be nice weather, to work in the garden.
Nice.
Thinking of the garden, we had not talked about this prior, but Ben and his girlfriend Nikita redid the vegetable garden for me, and I have on the south side of the house, I have always had a vegetable garden with raised beds. I have not gardened out there for the last 2-3 years. Just too much going on caring for my mom that I just hadn't done anything. So they put new boards in because the boards for the raised bed had failed. So they put new boards in, and they put a nice little walkway in with pavers. And we went and bought plants, and Nikita planted most of the plants. So I've got a vegetable garden.
Nice.
This year. But I have some seeds that need to be planted, so I'm going to go out there and do that. My plan is to work on that for over the next 2 days.
All right.
So it was very nice of them to do that.
Oh, I'm jealous.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Actually, it's not bad because I have grading to do and things to get finished for the end of the semester. Right. I'm on a selection committee, so I have paper screening to do, and then we're going to have interviews. So the weather should be should be looking up toward the end of next week, which will be about the time when I can actually enjoy it. So
yeah.
So
There's
that's
nothing
fine.
worse than having to sit there and grade when the weather's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm
Well.
moaning about something that I really shouldn't be moaning about, but really is. I went to Retzlaff Winery, the Spinning in the Winery, and this was just this last weekend. And it's a couple weeks earlier this year, so we knew it would be cooler. And usually it's hot, shorts and tank top weather, wear a hat, bring your water, that kind of thing. And oh my gosh, I never took my sweater off the whole time. I sat in the sun because if I sat in the shade, it was too cold. The wind was horribly cold, like really marine, that marine feeling wind, even though Livermore is in the East Bay. Yeah, it's just been a strange, cool spring.
Well, okay, so projects.
Let's
Let's have a little update.
Yeah, so actually my projects have not been very well behaved. I was talking to our friend Janice and about her what she's calling her Pismo Beach tea.
Yes.
Because she just keeps bringing it everywhere like your socks. She was telling me about a problem that she had, and then I was commiserating because I had been having some things going wrong with my projects too, and so she was calling them naughty knits, and I thought that's really good. So I do have some naughty knits.
Okay.
My Argyle socks I did something wrong. And I think it might have been while I was at the conference. We had a 6-hour, something like that, drive down to Southern California, and then 6 hours back, and somewhere in that trip I was working on the Argyle socks, and I made a mistake. Something wasn't lining up properly, and I ripped it back when I got home, but I think I didn't rip it back far enough. Anyway, the diamonds. The corners of the diamonds, the widest part of the diamond, that is supposed to be where your little crisscross lines cross. And so I'm going along on the instep where it's just one diamond, that goes down the instep of your foot. I'm going along on the instep. I think I'm going fine. I don't see anything wrong. It looks perfectly normal. And then I'm crossing the two crisscrosses like 4 rows below the widest part of the diamond. It's like, okay, I don't know why this is happening. And I tried to figure out why it was happening. And finally I just decided, you know what? I don't care why. I'm just going to rip it. I'm just going to rip it back to the beginning. I'm going to start that instep diamond over again. So I got a little frustrated and put those away. They're in the naughty corner. In the naughty spot. What was that show? Where they had the kid, the nanny had the kids. I never watched it. I just remember hearing about.
Oh, yes.
You need to go sit in the naughty spot.
Yes, which a lot of people thought that was terrible.
Well,
I can't remember the name
I
of that
think
show,
I might be a believer in the naughty spot, at least for my knitting. I can't talk about child rearing, but I can say for my knitting, those Argyle socks are currently in the naughty spot.
Okay.
The other one this one is not naughty. It's just not fun. The 2 at a time socks. I actually made really good progress on them while I was at the conference. They're not perfect conference knitting because my yarn, there's so much yarn management. I'm doing 2 at a time on 2 circulars. And I probably would like it a little bit better. I'm going to interrupt myself for a second because if anyone notices that while I'm talking, I'm like grunting. Ugh. I'm tearing the roving. I'm tearing apart roving for the combo spin, and it's Lincoln, so it's a little bit more difficult to pull apart now that it's been dyed. Anyway, I should probably stop while I'm talking because.
Okay, I didn't notice anything.
Okay, I
did hear just a short while ago the chickens.
Oh yes.
But I like the sound of the chicken, so don't edit that out.
Okay, I won't. Unless they start getting really bad.
Okay.
Sorry for the little interruption, but I sound like I'm grunting as I'm pulling apart roving. It shouldn't be this hard to pull apart, but it got a little tangled in the dyeing. Okay, so these 2 at a time socks. I think if I were doing it on magic loop, if I had a long enough needle to do 2 at a time on magic loop, maybe I would like it a little bit better. I'm not a huge fan of magic loop, so that's maybe not the case. But 2 at a time on 2 circulars, and I get the yarn tangled into the circulars, and then every so often during the conference, I would have to just put it away because I needed to go sit in a corner and get it all untangled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Go sit in the naughty corner.
Yes.
Right?
So that's not been too much fun. But I
have to say that just hearing about those socks exhausts me.
Well, and
it's not fun to hear about the socks, Kelly. I can imagine how it must not be fun knitting on the socks.
Yeah, well, I did have kind of an epiphany this morning because I was looking at my project page as I was getting ready for recording, and I have started to move from the purple into the orange, which is nice, right? The color change is starting. But I'm thinking, geez, I've almost got the length of my normal sock cuff, and it's just barely starting into the orange. I'm going to finish these socks before I've really gone through the patterning. And so then I thought, you know what I'll do? What I think I'll do, although this is maybe overkill on a pair of socks I'm not enjoying. But what I should do, I think, is I'll just go, but it's ribbing. What I was going to say is I could just do one big, long, giant tube, and I could probably get 2 pairs of socks out of it. Cut it up when it's done.
Oh.
And then put the heels, put afterthought heels. And toes in. Do the toe decreases and the heels afterwards. But I would have to decide, okay, here's where the ribbing stops. And now I'm going to do stuff.
Can you just make it all ribbing? The whole tube ribbing?
I don't think I've ever made a pair of socks that had ribbing on the bottom.
Oh, right.
I've done ribbing on the instep.
Yeah, I've done ribbing on the instep, but not on the bottom. And I think that's one of the issues, is it wouldn't be comfortable.
I don't think I would notice that I had ribbing bumps. I don't know. But I was thinking maybe I just need to make a giant long tube and then cut it up into 4 pieces and put toes on and heels. Because otherwise I'm not going to use all this sock blank.
Yeah, and then you'll have 2 pairs of socks that look completely different.
Right.
Because you'll have, by the time you get to the second pair,
it'll be the orange part of the gradient. Yeah. So, yeah. So this was a really good idea. 2 at a time sock blank is a really good idea, but my socks aren't big enough to use the whole gradient, and I should have probably bought a different type of sock blank, one of those ones that has drawing on it or something where the knitting would be interesting, because right now the knitting is not that interesting because it's the big long purple. Yeah.
Well, I think though when you were looking for that, we had a hard time finding sock blanks that had 2.
Right.
It was singles, I think.
That should have been a sign.
Maybe that's why. Yeah.
That should have been a sign. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So, but I did get a lot done on those on the trip, and then I was also working on something I started right before the trip, which is the summer sleeveless top. Summer spelled SOMMER. And it's by I want to say the designer is Mari Chibu, and I'm making it with Valley Yarns Longmeadow, which is a acrylic cotton blend. And it's actually going very well. So that is the one part of my knitting that is going well. I got a lot done during the trip. Actually, when I got home from that trip, I was tired of knitting. Oh, that's never happened to me before. But partway through the drive home, I was like, I'm putting this away. I'm tired of knitting. I got a lot of knitting at the conference. I got a lot of knitting on the way down, a lot of knitting on the way home. I got home and was like, okay, I'm tired of knitting. But that's really all I've been doing. And then I did pick up a mother bear to start just because I felt like doing something different. 2 projects I'm not thrilled about at the moment. I love the Argyle socks, don't get me wrong, but
But yeah, when you make a mistake, it's
twice.
Yeah.
Well,
it can be frustrating.
And ripping out in tarsia is not really fun because you have to untangle all those wrapped stitches.
Right.
So I have to just sit down and think of it as just a part of the project that I have to undo all that and rewrap everything. I'm hoping to have a little more inspiration once school is out, finals are done, grading's finished, and then I can get inspired again.
So are there things you're looking at to do?
Actually, yeah. I have 3 sweaters. Well, I have a 1,000-yard cone of cashmere that I'd like to use because it's been sitting in my stash a little while. And it's just a natural color. And I do have some other yarn that I thought I could put in with it if I needed to extend it a little and make stripes. But I was looking this morning at a couple of patterns. One of them is called, I want to say Melanie, but it's not. It's Melaine, Melaine by Julie Partee.
Are these in your queue?
No. I have a search that I've saved for a summer sweater. And so I was just looking at that search. It's a fingering weight pattern. It just came out. And it's really cute. It's cropped, short. I would probably make it a little bit longer, although I might not have enough yarn. It's got lace on the yoke and down the button band. But it's just a small cropped cardigan. So that's a possibility. And then the other one is called Bloom. This one, it caught my eye, and then when I looked at it more closely, I thought, I don't know, this is not really my style. But I don't know, there's something about it that I really like. It has both long sleeved and short sleeve versions, and I might need to do short sleeve if I'm going to use the 1,000 yards. But it's got a little collar, like a little lace picot textured collar. One of the versions of it has little pearl buttons.
What's the name of this?
It's called Bloom, and the designer is Ann B. Hansen. I don't know. It's different from my usual. It's more feminine looking than things I'm usually attracted to, but it's got the same collar detail as on the pockets and on the sleeves, and it's got a little detail on the button band, and the raglan sleeve shaping also has some interesting kind of lacy detail. It's more of a dress-up kind of sweater. But cashmere, it's kind of dress-up, And then the third one that I saw that I liked is called Koru cardigan, Koru, and it's by Francois Denoy. That one, actually this one is older. It was published in November of 2016. The other one was a new pattern. It got a lace, like a traveling stitches and holes. It looks like cables and lace, but I think it's traveling stitches. A big panel in the back is this traveling stitches and yarn overs, and then a panel down the front, not the whole front, but just like the armhole.
This one I find, this is cute.
I can't really tell. I guess it goes all the way down. They don't show a very good picture of the side detail, but it goes from the top of the shoulder all the way down the side of the front, the underarm side of the front. That one might be the best possibility because it's a little fancy, but not too.
Oh, if you look at the projects, you can see the side panel.
Okay. So that one's a little bit fancy, but not so, not quite so feminine and delicate as the one with the collar.
Yeah. I think this is a nice pattern.
This is by Aroha Knits, the Koru cardigan. So that's my thinking about a future project, but I have too many other things to get going on that I probably shouldn't even be thinking about it. But what I want to do is just start something new and leave my naughty projects alone.
Right.
So, yeah.
If they don't behave, they can't come out and play.
Exactly. So what about you?
Well, I think I have some naughty projects too.
Some naughty knits.
Some naughty knits. And I have to say, I think most of it is me. But
The naughty knitter.
So I'm a naughty knitter. So my first project I've been working on pretty consistently is Little Wave, the cardigan by Gudrun Johnston.
That's the blue one, right? The denim-y blue?
The blue one out of the Neighborhood Fiber Company. I don't remember now where I was when we last talked, but I knit both sleeves and attached them and did the yoke. I made my first trip into the yarn shop to get help, and I'll get back to that. Figured out that problem, and then I brought it with me to the beach last weekend with the idea I was going to finish the yoke and put on the collar, and I got stuck. It has saddle shoulders, which I had not done before.
Oh, I haven't either.
It started telling me to bind off, and where I was binding off was in like the back, and I'm like, I don't understand why I'm binding off at the back when it has the saddle shoulder creates a line with the doing the slip knit to do the decrease actually then creates a nice line across the back separating the patterning and the yoke of the shoulder.
Okay.
I'm explaining that the right way. And I'm like, I don't understand why I'm binding off, and then I don't bind off any more stitches. And I kept reading the pattern. Kim was with me at the beach. We had a discussion about it, and I thought, I just don't think this is right. So I stopped knitting on it, tried to work on my other pattern, which I will get to. Thought I couldn't do that one, and so I just kind of stopped knitting. I had my shawl, Alenia shawl, which is just basic garter stitch. I worked on that. But I got home, and the next day, on Monday, I went into the yarn shop again, and I'm happy to say, it makes me feel better about myself. They couldn't figure it out. So I was in there so they finally figured it out. But it took a third set of eyes to figure it out.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's not the pattern, of course. It's not the pattern. It was me. This is what I missed. But it is work one wrong side row. Just those little words completely screwed me up. And so I had to bind off 9 stitches. The 9 stitches I was supposed to bind off. If you worked the one wrong side row, then you were put in the correct place. That you would then begin binding off 9 stitches, which is actually the front neckline of the sweater, which I'm now going to pick. I will eventually pick those stitches up for the collar. And then all the shaping then took place, because then you start using up stitches. The slip knit starts using up stitches off the back and creates that yoke across the back. Oh. Then you do the same thing on the other side, and where those 2 rows of stockinette meet, you then use the I'm not describing it very well, but use the Kitchener stitch to join those on the back.
Huh, okay.
Anyway, here's my thing about the pattern. So first of all, I have to just give a shout out to the Fiber Gallery in the Greenwood neighborhood of Seattle, because they were very nice to help me, and they figured it out. My 2 problems that I was having. The first time I went in, what I noticed about the pattern is you were doing, and this happens with a lot of sweaters, you're doing the decreases or increases, depending on if it's top down or bottom up, for the sleeves and the neckline at the same time, right? And I know that. Yeah. And so you have to keep track of those 2 decreases or increases. I knew that, but when you would get to, because there was the shaping for the sort of a raglan shaping for part of the sleeve. Then you had to do the shaping for the top of the sleeve. And then you had to do the shaping for the saddle shoulder that goes across the top of the shoulder. As I'm talking, I'm drawing all this on my shoulder, which nobody can see. And so those are 3 different sections. And so at the end of that first section, the raglan shaping under the arm kind of, it says and this is where I got stuck the first time, it says at the end of the section, you should have this many stitches on your needle. And I had way more than that. And I couldn't figure out why. Well, it's because I still had to do increases for the decreases for the neckline.
Okay.
As I can't remember, but my count didn't match. Well, then when I figured out, that's all. If I
because you're supposed to be doing something else at the same time,
right? Yeah. And so then I get to the end of the next section, and let me back up. When I got to the end of the first section, it tells you how many stitches you should have across the back for the sleeve and the front. When you get to the end of the second section, it just says section. It just tells you how many stitches you should have on your needle.
Okay.
But how many am I supposed to have for the back,
right,
the shoulder, and the front? And then you get to the end of the third section, it then says how many you're supposed to have in each, the back, the shoulder, the sleeve. And I found that confusing. It's much more helpful to tell you how many stitches you're supposed to have on your needle across the back, the sleeves, and the front, than how many stitches you're supposed to have on your needles. And I don't know why and there's got to be a reason why that I just don't understand that the designer did it that way. That sometimes she gives you the total count and sometimes she gives you the count for each part of the sweater. And the other thing that my second problem is I was doing all the shaping, and then when I got to I had to start doing the shaping for the saddle shoulders, I missed that sentence, just those words, work one wrong side row.
Yeah.
I missed that because it was part of a paragraph. And so it's me reading, and I have to say I take full responsibility for the fact that I did not read that. And this happens a lot in patterns. They give you the directions. You're supposed to be doing all this shaping, decreasing, increasing, or whatever. I think that work one wrong side row should be pulled out as a separate line.
Right, because it's like a separate line of the instructions,
Right, because just when you're reading a pattern, each set of instructions is a paragraph or a separate line. This is pretty significant. I think it would have been nice if it was called out as a separate line.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because that reminds me of something Robert has said to me a few times when he hasn't heard something that I've said. Like, well, but I told you. He's like, Kelly, you were disguising it in ordinary conversation.
Yes.
If you want me to remember something, if you want me to really pay attention, you can't disguise it in ordinary conversation.
Yes. Well, and the same thing, like when I used to work, my office there was 4 of us in just one big room. And so everybody would be talking, and I got so good at just tuning everybody out so I could focus on what I was doing that they started asking me questions, and I didn't hear them, so everybody had to say my name first to get my attention. So the same thing, like, okay, Marsha, this is important. Yeah.
No.
So that was an interesting thing. Now I'm just going to go on about patterns. It is an interesting thing about how to write directions so that everybody can understand. Apparently, everybody else understood this and could read the thing because I looked in the forums, like about this sweater, like comments, and I couldn't find anybody making any comments about this, not understanding this. And so I think it was me, because it is true. Sometimes you read something and you read it over and over and over again and you miss a little detail. Yeah. And that little detail has significant consequences if you miss it. I've never written a pattern, but I think it must be really challenging to write directions so that everybody can understand them. And it reminds me of years ago, Ben was doing some tutoring. The tutor would give him instructions, but they had so like she would draw something on. It was on her side of the table, and they had a barrier between them, and she would actually draw something, and then she had to tell him how to draw it. And then and he couldn't see her picture. And she'd say, make a line about 2 inches long that's straight, and then attach like one that curves, and she would describe this. And then they would have to compare and see how well he was able to listen to the instructions. And then he would do the same thing for her. How well was he explaining what he wanted her to do? So that's what it reminded me in patterns. You have to write instructions in a way that everybody can understand them. And I think that's a huge challenge.
And I think it's even more challenging with some of the modern patterns because they do put in so much of what they think is help. More there's way more instructions in most of the patterns that I use now than, for example, in that 1948 cardigan sweater that I made, right? Where it just says, decrease 5 times over the next 20 rounds while in pattern. Like, okay. That leaves a lot to your discretion and having to figure it out. But But I find if I look at that and I figure it out in my own way of thinking. Whereas if somebody describes to me what has to happen in a pattern, there's more chance that they don't think like I do. Mm-hmm. And then it makes it even more confusing. The more you explain, the more chances there are for it to get confusing for someone. You know, if you're not super careful, or if you haven't sort of thought about, well, what are people going to miss? What is it that's going to cause the problem here? And that's, you know, that again, that's why some of the tech editors are super talented and can catch that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Some pattern designers are super talented and can catch that kind of stuff. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes it's just a one person's quirk in the way they're reading or not reading something.
Yes. Yeah.
That you can't even, as a pattern designer, there's no way you could predict that. There's so many variables. It would be very difficult, I think.
And then, you know, those mystery knit-alongs, I'm not quite sure how those work, because I've only tried one once and I gave up on it. But at least I have, with the sweater, I have pictures in the pattern. Mm-hmm. I have a schematic in the pattern, but also just pictures. And I can go online and I was looking at other people's projects.
Yeah.
And reading their notes and looking on the forum. But if you have a mystery knit-along, you can only go off the text on the page. There's no picture to look at.
I can tell you because I did a mystery knit-along with a pair of socks. That they turned out too small, so I ended up ripping them out. But the thing that I thought was good about the mystery knit-along is that it really forced me to read the pattern carefully. Because what I find I do is I have looked at the picture, right? Mm-hmm. And I kind of know what's happening, and I kind of know what's coming next. And so because I think I know... I don't, like, in my head, I don't consciously think, oh, well, I know what's going on, so I don't have to read. Mm-hmm. But I think my brain does that to me, where it's like, oh, yeah, she knows this. We can just skip ahead and miss this line that says work one wrong side row. You know, I mean, right. That's the kind of thing that happens when you feel like you know what comes next. And so I did find that to be a really good exercise in having to read the pattern carefully in a way that I don't always. Well, I mostly don't. But not knowing what was coming next meant I had to. Because I couldn't just judge if I was doing it right by the picture or, you know, the next part of the pattern or anything like that. Because I didn't have that information yet.
Yeah.
Huh, well.
Yeah. So, anyway, but the rest of the sweater, you know, I also, the sleeves, I just want to talk about that because I decided you knit them from the cuff up and then attach them to the body. And I decided to do a provisional cast on because I wanted to be able to adjust the length. Right. And I also wanted to change the cuff, has that rolled back cuff, which I didn't want. I just want to have ribbing. They're long. I'm going to have to rip them back to allow room for the ribbing.
Oh.
Which is interesting. So I'm glad I put the provisional cast on.
Yeah.
And then, but my other thing, and I had read about this in the project notes that people had made, is the sleeves are big. They're quite big around. And people had talked about how they had reduced the number of stitches to make them smaller. I did not do that. I just followed the pattern. And when it's done, and I'm going to have to try it on and make a decision. Once I wash and block it, I have to make a decision. Well, and actually, I think what I'm going to do is wash and block it before I finish the sleeves, just because they change.
Yeah.
And then I'll make my decision if I want to just rip them back and make them smaller.
Okay.
I don't want to do that, but I have to just see if I'm willing to live with how they look. If they look messy, if they're too big, or if they just look, stylishly slouchy.
Well, well, and I find... And this may not be the case with this, but I find a lot of the sweaters now are not designed to go over anything. The sleeve is not designed to go over. You know, I would like a sweater like this. Funky Grandpa is pretty good because it has a lot of positive ease. But even I would like a sweater that I could wear, a long sleeve sweater over a short sleeve tee. or, some kind of short sleeve shirt, and still be able to get those short sleeves to lay down and like be able to get your hand in there so you can smooth them down if you need to. I mean, the purpose of a sweater is to keep your arms warm when you're wearing something that doesn't.
Yes.
So if the only thing I can wear my sweater over is a long sleeve t-shirt, that sweater is not as useful to me.
Right.
So maybe you'll just have enough room to wear it over something. But, well, good luck. I hope it doesn't require ripping.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, it won't be the end of the world, if I do have to.
Well, you are enjoying that yarn, right?
I do like the yarn, and they go, and it's, it's worsted weight, so it goes pretty quickly. So, but then just real quickly, also, I started the Summer Fjord. This is the first time I've made a pattern where I'm not using the yarn that they suggest. So it's for fingering weight yarn, and I'm using DK, which is significantly different. So I'm making the small, I believe, because my gauge is significantly different than what they want. So
by making the small, you think it will come out to be the size that you need.
Right. But I realized that I do have to change the length. So the sleeves, for example, the small, that's the sleeve opening is 5.5 inches, which is not enough. So I want it to be, I measured my other t-shirts I've made, and it's 7.5 inches, and which is the size large. So I've decided any instructions that relate to length, I have to follow the large instructions. And anything referring to circumference, I'm going to follow the small instructions.
Or stitches or rows, probably.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound like it has row instructions, like do this for this many rows.
I don't know. I have not gotten that far because I've not read all the way through the end of the pattern, which I probably should have done.
I'm just thinking it's not, I don't think there's any big surprises. That neck was difficult,
I think the main thing is just getting started on the yoke and the sleeves. Those are the main thing. And then I think I'll just knit till I think it's long enough, and then I'll do, because then isn't the back is a little longer than the front?
You do short rows in the ribbing.
Yeah. Anyway, but I'm working on that, and I took both projects to the beach and got stuck on both of them, and I have to say, knitting, I thought it was going to be really relaxing to knit at the beach. It was very relaxing at the beach. It was fun. We had a great time, but the house we stayed in, the lighting was not very good. They had no table lamps, and so I couldn't really see at night. And then, during the day we were on the beach. Yeah, you were doing things. All this cooking and all this conversation, and we watched the royal wedding, and so, of course, I had to watch that. So I did not get very much knitting done. I had to just set both projects aside because I couldn't. I needed to concentrate on them, and that setting was not right. You didn't have the kind of focus that you needed for that type of project, or that stage in the project, at least. Yeah. So my last project that I've been working on is combo spin. So I've been working on that. I spin a little bit every day on that. So, Kelly, my combo spin also now reminds us that we had put the question out to listeners if there is something they wanted to ask us, a topic that they would like us to discuss, to email us. And we had a listener email us asking us to talk more about combo spin. Yeah. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay. So, we had an email from Leona. And she says, "Hi to Ewes. I really enjoy your podcast. I'm a relatively new knitter and love hearing about what you're knitting and your adventures. I have a question that I would love for you to answer on some upcoming podcast. What is a combo spin? I have Googled it, but I am not finding a good answer. Thanks so much." So this is Leona from Columbus, Ohio. Thanks, Leona, for the question. Gives Marsha and I an opportunity to talk about something really fun. But I can tell you, if you put combo spin into Google, well, I know everybody's Google results are a little bit different, but when I put combo spin into Google, I get lots of pictures of fishing rods. Oh. There must be something in fishing that's called combo spin or spin and combo or something, that triggers fishing.
fishing rods. Actually, it's probably the reels.
Well, and let me just say, on Instagram, if you put in hashtag combo spin, you get yarn. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of ice skating. Yeah, ice skating and pole dancing.
Okay.
So it's time for combo spin yarn to take over ice skaters and pole dancers. But anyway.
What I wanted to talk about, though, is how it originally came about is that Spin-Off, which is a spinning magazine published by Interweave, one of their contributors, Debbie Held, did an article about this type of spinning, and she interviewed someone who is on Ravelry. Well, her name is Tracy, and she has the Passionate Spinners podcast, and passionate is spelled P-A-S-S-I-O, and then the word knit, K-N-I-T. So, Passionate Spinners podcast. What you do is you take braids of, it's kind of, you know how, Marsha, I think of it this way. You know how with all the really pretty variegated yarns that came out, variegated sock yarns, and then pretty soon there were all these patterns for how to use all that sock yarn that you had in ways that weren't socks. Mm-hmm. And then there were all of these really interesting speckled yarns that people loved, and so they had stash full of speckled yarns, but didn't know what to do with it. So then patterns came out for how to use your speckled yarns.
Yeah.
I think of it kind of like that, because spinners would buy these braids, really pretty braids of fiber. And then, like I was asked at the Retzloff spin-in, well, what are you going to do with that yarn? Mm-hmm. And you kind of have that, what are you going to do with that? Really pretty braid, and okay, you could fractal spin it. You could make long stripes and chain ply it to preserve the striping sequence. There's all kinds of different things you can do,
right,
to spin these braids in different ways. But once that's been exhausted, people have done that, they're looking for something else. And so how this came about, I think, is from that. So you take a bunch of different braids of fiber. That's the way it originally came about. A bunch of different braids of fiber, and this kind of makes me wince a little bit. You tear them up. So, the dyers have put these colors together and blended these colors together, but then you go through and you just tear it up into pieces, kind of by color. I mean, that's what you did, right? You separated them at each color change.
Yeah, that's what I try to do.
Yeah. I'm having a little harder time doing that with this Lincoln roving that I'm tearing up today, because the color changes are too short. But I think that's okay. I mean, it'll just be a slightly different look. And that's what you did, right?
Well, what I did is I'm on my third one. And so what I did is I took the braids and I divided them, each braid lengthwise, into 6 long pieces, and then put one long piece in a pile, and then did to the second one, put one piece of that into the pile. So I ended up with 6 piles with 6 different, I think I had 6 braids.
Okay.
So I made 6 piles, each with a piece of that braid in there.
Uh-huh. And
then I went through and each of those 6th of a braid, I broke into small pieces, and I tried to break it where the color break was. This third one I'm doing, though, some of the color repeats were short, as you said, so short I couldn't break them short enough. I think, though, the Passionate Knitter has a video.
Right, and I'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, and it's been linked to, a lot of people have linked to that, but we'll go ahead and link to it again. I believe what she does is she just breaks it into the long sections, and then I don't know that she's breaking it into shorter ones.
Oh, okay.
There really is no right way to do this.
Exactly.
Because it is supposed to be sort of free form.
Right.
Because I wanted we're getting into more detail now, but some of the projects ended up having quite significant stripes, and I didn't want that. So that's why I tried to create sort of equal piles of color. Yeah. And then from those piles, if I broke them into small pieces, then I pulled randomly from that. I think it's possible you could just take all of your fiber and break it into small pieces and throw it in a big pile.
Yeah.
And just pull from that pile.
Yeah. So it would be even more, it would be random overall, not random within each ply.
Right.
Because you randomized it into 3 piles, essentially. I mean, 6, but then those 6 became your 3 plies.
Right.
Yeah. The idea behind this was to have a knit-along for spinners. So spinners would spin their yarn and then do this knit-along. And Interweave called it the Combo Spin Sal-Cal. So spin-along, knit-along. And they have also, on the Interweave spin-off Ravelry group, has a discussion board about this combo spin-along, knit-along too, that has a lot of really interesting pictures. And if you go to that Ravelry group and go to that discussion, Combo Spin Sal-Cal, and at the very top of the Ravelry group, you have some choices in the discussion board, and you can pick images only. So if you don't want to read everybody's, what everybody's talking about, you just want to see pictures, you can click on the images. And that's what I did, getting ready for this episode. I just went through and I looked at the images in those 2 discussion boards. One was the Passionate Spinners discussion board, and then the other one is the spin-off discussion board in Ravelry. And you really can see a wide variety of striping. Some of them are really big stripes and very contrasting. Like the colors didn't get mixed a lot. And then some of them are very small stripes and not very contrasting at all. Either the colors got really mixed, or maybe they started like you with a color palette. I'd imagine if you were doing this from stash, which was the original idea, to use up stash of spinning braids, if you were doing this from stash, you would probably have, a lot of people would have kind of a similar color theme going on, because you buy what you like, and a lot of times that turns out to be the same thing over and over.
Right, yeah.
So, but yeah, I think no matter how you tear it up into pieces, you do want to randomize it. And like this, what I'm tearing up today is it's not called pencil roving, it's called pin drafted. Is pin drafted Lincoln. So it's quite narrow already. The roving is quite narrow already. So there was no need to split it vertically, because I won't be able to, when I spin these little pieces, they will spin quickly. In fact, I probably could make them longer, because this is such a long wool. I could probably make my pieces bigger, because it will spin pretty quickly. But if you don't strip your roving, if you don't strip it vertically first, divide it vertically first, even like a 4-inch piece, that's going to be a long stretch of that same color, because the roving is so thick. Yeah. And so that's why it gets divided vertically first.
Well, and let me just say about that. You could do that if you want.
Yeah, you could.
Because I think that's the thing that's... it would just be another possible look.
Right, another variation, yeah.
My sense of this, just now having done the third one, I think you could... So my first one, I had all the same fiber. I dyed my own. So I had all the same fiber, but I just threw colors on there. And so I had hot pink, and I had bright blue, and I had... yellow. I just had all kinds of different colors that I just threw on there. Teal or dark forest green. It has a very different look because it has just all these different colors. And the one I'm doing now, I picked all different kinds of fiber. So I have a lot of silk in there. The last episode, I think we talked about the percentages. But a lot of silk and merino. There's some cashmere. There's Polworth in there. Something else. Oh, that Tasmanian comeback. But then I tried to just pick colors all in the green family. So it'll be, and it looks very different than my first one, which is so wild. I love it, but it's super wild. Well,
it's not so wild now that it's knit up, though.
Yes, it looked really wild before I started spinning it, or before I started breaking it all apart, and then. You blend it, right, because you're now pulling all these different colors, so you blend it into the single, And then I've always done a 3-ply, which blends it even more. So that's the other thing too. It'll change the look depending on how many plies you have.
Right. You get more blending with 3 plies. In fact, I was reading in the discussion board, either the spin-off or the Passionate Spinner discussion board, and somebody was saying, no, they didn't want to 3-ply it because they thought it would make it too muddy. It would muddy the colors. But I don't think so either. I think it really is a nice, to me, that's a really nice blending.
And I also think it depends on what you want. Now, if you want to have a lot of less color change, so, my sweaters, there's only one color in a row. What am I trying to say? Like, there'll be a section that has a lot of yellow in it. That doesn't repeat on the second row or the third row. It's like, so there's not, it has just one, the stripes are just one row, where some of them their stripes are over 5 or 6 rows.
Right.
And it's just another look.
Right.
Nothing's right or wrong. It's just.
That's true.
And I think you'll get more striping like that if it's a 2-ply.
Right. There's more chances for the same 2 colors to come together in the plying. If there's only 2 plies.
Yeah. And when I was plying the first 2, and I've plied some of my third one, there's times where I have 2 colors meet, but I never have 3 I don't think I've ever had 3 colors meet.
Yeah, so you have...
Now this one that I'm doing the third one, because some of the colors are very similar, I can't really tell if it's the same. Like there might be 2 that are the same, but the third one, I'm not really sure if it's the same.
It's similar at least.
Yeah.
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 I think there's a lot of possibilities with this combo spin, and the original spin-off magazine that had it was the Winter 2017 issue. The challenge was to spin and knit a sweater using the combo spin technique between December 28th, 2016 and March 31st, 2017. So it was a year ago. So you were right on trend, Marsha.
Well, and I only heard about it because of we had a conversation about it. And I was just so intrigued by the idea.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and there's some other options that I'm wanting to explore with the one that I'm doing. So most of them are done with braids of fiber that people have. Most of the fiber is for sweaters because it originally was a sweater knit along. Most of the fiber is white that's been dyed. Although I suppose there are some people who have done you can buy braids of fiber that are dyed over like a oatmeal BFL. But there's not many braids that you buy that are over dyed over gray.
Right.
So the combo spin that I'm tearing up right now is this Lincoln roving that I got. Janai gave it to me. She had won it at Retzlaff a couple of years ago. And so she brought it over and it's like, wow, thanks, I love Lincoln. But it's not sweater yarn.
Yeah.
And it's gray. It's like a silver, really pretty silvery gray. Lincoln's a long wool. And so Marsha dyed some of it while she was here. And then I threw dye on a little bit more. So I'm not even sure how much I have right now. But I'm thinking of not a sweater, but maybe a rug. I want to do a punch needle rug hooking. So that's a possibility. And then once I get the yarn made, I don't know, maybe a woven rug. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing because most of the use of the combo spin that I've seen is knitting.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything woven.
Yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see how a combo spin turns out when in a woven. And Kelly, are you thinking of a 3-ply or a 2-ply? Or have you gotten that far?
I haven't really gotten that far. I think I was originally thinking of a 3-ply, and the reason for that is because I think this Lincoln will spin fairly thin. The plies will be fairly fine because the roving is already fine. It's already, what do they call it? Pin drafted. So there's not a whole lot of thickness to it to begin with. And then when you draft it out and start spinning, it gets even thinner.
Yeah.
And so I think my plies will be too fine for like a rug in a 2-ply. I think maybe a 3-ply will probably work better. Depending on what I want, I don't really want to do a 4-ply, but But, I mean, depending on what I want for thickness, the thickness, I might be better off with a 4-ply. I've never spun a 4-ply, I don't think. Just because it seems like a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
For not a lot of, it's for marginally different results. Mm-hmm. So I haven't ever really, maybe I did it as an experiment, but I haven't ever done a project that was a 4-ply. But depending on how thick this yarn is, I might, and what I decide to do with it, I might. You want your rug yarn to be a little thicker. So, and then the other possibility is I'd like to make a seat cushion for the sewing machine, for the sewing machine stool, but that's not going to take that much yarn. So I'm excited to be doing a combo spin in a little different flavor, because there are so many ways that you could do this.
Yeah, I think the possibilities are sort of endless.
And then there's this other technique that I've seen people do, and sometimes they call it a combo spin, but I've also seen it referred to as a combo draft, where you actually, again, designed to use multiple braids of fiber, where you actually take 2 braids and you hold them together. So you would split the braid vertically, so you have a thinner piece.
Oh, okay.
And then you take that thinner piece of the braid along with another thinner piece of a different braid, and you hold them together while you're spinning, and then you get sort of barber poling within your single, and you're, combining colors, I guess you could be combining wool, but not by carding it together, just by holding it together and spinning it.
Okay.
So that would be kind of interesting too, to grab 2 of these pieces and spin them, but that's a little less pleasant spinning. I've tried holding things together to spin, and there's a lot of management of fiber that you have to do, and it's, sometimes I just like to sit down and spin, and this is good for that. The regular combo spin is good for that.
Would this be a combo spin as if you had, say you had 3 rovings. You want to do a 3-ply and you have 3 rovings. You would just spin a bobbin of each roving and then just ply those together?
I don't think I would call that a combo spin.
Okay.
I mean, you're certainly combining rovings, but that's not... People were doing that before. That was one of those other kinds of combining that people were doing before. I think this idea, calling it a combo spin, is just because it breaks it up even more.
Yeah.
And allows you to blend things that maybe you wouldn't blend.
Well, and I think that it's an interesting idea too. Like we were talking about, there is no bad yarn.
Right.
And I guess, and there's a use for it, and you can transform something that you don't necessarily like, you can transform it. The same thing with the braids. If you win a braid someplace or someone gives it to you, you don't really like the color, it could be transformed if you combine it with other braids. Yeah. And it's sometimes in choosing colors, I think sometimes it's good to put a color that you would not necessarily buy on, to make it pop and stand out, like a color you don't necessarily like.
Right.
Sometimes is a good thing.
Right.
Like the one I'm doing now, I have, it's actually called Old Rose. It was a roving that had green, but a little bit of rose. And I would never buy anything that's kind of an old rose color, that kind of muddy rose. I would never buy anything like that. But a little bit in that braid is turning out to be really nice in the yarn. Yeah,
I think it's kind of like painting, if you're painting something, I'm not a painter, but I know if you look at a painting, sometimes if you look at it not looking at what the picture is, but you just look at the colors and the paints, like what you see as a blue sky, when you actually look at it, there are some really surprising and unexpected colors of paint that the painter used. And I think it's the same thing, that sort of surprising and unexpected color in there can really make something happen that you'll be surprised by in the end. And like this roving that I'm doing right now, there is not much, there's a lot of teal in here, but by the time I get done, I don't think there's going to be a lot of rhyme or reason to the coloring, because there's teal, there's blue, there's green, there's yellow, there's brown, there's black, and it's all overdyed with it's all the overdyed silver. There's a little bit of red that's kind of pinkish. And I think maybe if I look at the colors, that's what I need a little more of. I kind of want to see all the colors in this. You know, what color am I missing? Okay, let's put some of that in there. And see what happens. But I guess right now, if I had to say, it looks like it's coming out more toward the blues and greens. Makes sense because you're overdying gray. That's always a good choice, right?
Yeah.
So
the other thing, and I have no idea how this would work, but you were talking about how it's difficult to find natural colored braids. But if you had just fiber, and do a combo spin of different natural colored fibers.
Oh, right, not dyed at all.
Not dyed at all.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Not sure what that would look like, but it would be an interesting
You wouldn't
idea.
have as much variation.
But if you had, like white merino and a black merino and a gray something, I don't know.
Your palette would be limited, I think.
The palette would be limited, but it might be kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
Or it might be a terrible idea.
Well, it would just be a different look, Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing about the combo spin is choosing a garment. Like if you're going to do a garment, it's like choosing a garment pattern that will work well with what you're doing. Like you chose something very plain for yours, which I thought was nice because it kept the focus on the yarn and the colors.
Yeah, I felt like anything that had like lace or cables, they would get lost in the busyness of the yarn.
Yeah,
I think a pattern. Another interesting idea though is a pattern that actually has some detail that breaks up the pattern. So like for example, Cindy Q. When she came to our meetup in January, she was wearing a sweater that was a combo spin, and it actually the shaping of it had a V that went down the back, I believe.
Yes, diagonal.
And that's an interesting. Yeah, so that's a pattern that's either completely plain or a pattern that has angles to it, shaping to it, so that it's breaking up the stripes, and that's an interesting technique too.
Yeah.
Any of the I think patterns that use Noro yarn are good ones to look at too, because Noro yarn in a way is sort of like a combo spin in the sense that the way the colors are.
Right, they just sort of change randomly with no pattern.
Yeah, so that's a good, I think yarns or patterns that use Noro yarn are good ones to look at too.
And I think there's a couple that have diagonal elements. Like Vera Valimaki, I think, has patterns with diagonal elements that would be maybe a good choice. But yeah, you're right, that sort of diagonal look. And then somebody I saw did one where it was a striped sweater. Maybe it was like the confetti or something, that it was gray or black or some solid color, and then the stripes were the combo spun yarn. So that's another option too, to use it like
combine it with a solid.
Yeah. So yeah, a million variations on this theme. But I do have to say I really love, and I can't remember now who it was in our group, in the discussion board, who said, "What is this compost bin that you're talking about?"
I know we have to work on our pronunciation. But I think the other challenge about combo spin, and it's an interesting test to be random. It's forced randomness, and I think for many people who are kind of like, okay, Kelly, I always think of your mother when she does socks. She knits the first sock, and then the second one, she always has to go through the yarn to find that same color and start at the same place. So when she finishes the second one, they match the first one exactly.
Yes.
If they're stripes.
Yes.
I'm not like that. I don't care. I like the fact that they don't match. But if you're the kind of person that wants your stripes and your socks to match, then combo spin is a really good exercise in not being able to completely control the look of the yarn.
Yes.
So you can't say, I'm going to spin a yarn that looks like this because I want to make this project.
Right.
You have to just spin it and see what it looks like.
Right.
I think sometimes it's difficult to look at that and like, well, I don't want to put that one in next to this one. I'll throw it back.
Right.
No, you have to use it. Well, you can do anything you want, and you can combine it any way you want. There are no rules, but it is an interesting exercise to force yourself to be random.
Right.
And just
even
choose the piece.
Yeah.
And take the piece that was given to you.
And if you get the same, see, now this is a discussion that's out there. If you reach in and grab a piece and it's the same as the one you just spun, do you throw it back? And so for randomness, I say no. Because when you flip a coin,
don't throw it back.
Because when you flip a coin and it comes up heads, and you flip the coin the next time, it could come up heads again. Right? You roll a die, you could get a 4, you roll it again, you could get a 4 again.
Right.
So you reach in and you grab a blue one, and you reach in and again and you grab another blue one. That is still random. Now, you might not want to spin another blue one, but if you're trying to be random, you should tell yourself, randomness includes the same thing happening more than once.
Right.
So, yeah.
However, as I say, there are no rules.
Right.
So you're not going to be kicked out of the combo spin group if you choose to not use the blue a second time.
Right, it's true. That's exactly true. Or, as I have also heard people talking about, while you're plying, if you come to a section in one of your singles that you don't want it plying with the other two, you stop, you rip off that piece of singles that's not the right color, quotation marks.
Yeah. No, I won't do
and
that.
you start from the color you like better to go there.
No. I say no.
You say that's against the rules.
That is against the rules, and that's not permitted. No, I'm kidding. You can do anything you want. But that seems like too much work.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is, and also what I'm going to say is that the braids you start with, or the fiber that you dye that you start with, and then the singles, and then if you do a 2-ply or a 3-ply, you know, it's all going to look different every time you do something to it, and then you knit with it.
Right.
And so that whole notion of like, well, I don't like that color with that color, you know, when it's knit into a sweater or a shawl or if it woven into a rug or however it's, whatever you're going to do with it, nobody's going to notice that.
Well, you don't know if you'll like it or not. I think that's the element.
Yeah,
that's the element that's kind of fun or frightening.
Yeah.
Is that what it looks like now is not going to be what it looks like next week when you've done more of the process. Is not going to be what it looks like once it's knit up, and you really can't predict.
Well, and I say too, the second combo spin, the idea was to use different fibers but similar colors. I wanted to have a little bit of blue in it. But my mistake I made is I bought a little bit too much blue. And so there's a lot more blue in the sweater than I had originally planned on. But do I like the sweater? Yes, I love the yarn. I love the sweater that I knit out of it. It was the one I took to Scotland, and I wore pretty much every day. So this third one I'm doing, I picked all greens and said I cannot have any blue. So I actually bought braids for it and intentionally picked braids that had no blue in them at all.
Right. And I remember when you were selecting them, you didn't even choose greens that were sort of leaning blue. Right. That they all had to be more yellow. More greens on the yellow side.
Yeah. I think that even though I think out of that whole, the second combo spin, I think the whole thing I had maybe 2 ounces of blue. Out of all those braids, the blue really stood out. And that's an interesting thing about color is that some colors, and you can kind of control it and you can kind of not control it. And it doesn't really, I don't think it's a huge deal, but it is interesting. Some colors tend to stand out more than other colors, and blue seems to stand out. For me, all my combo spins, the blue seems to stand out more than any other color for some reason. I don't know how that works with the colors, even though I would thought like the yellow and the hot pink would stand out more in the first one. It was the blue that really stood out.
Yeah. I guess if you've done enough of them, you might get a sense of that. I just think the combo spin is a really interesting exercise. and you get really beautiful yarn and really different results. You know, it's not something you could get from, well, maybe if you went and bought Noro, but it's not even that. It's not something you could get from a commercial yarn. That's really appealing too. Get something different out of your spinning.
Yeah.
So, well, Leona, this is probably more than you ever wanted to know about combo spin.
Yes, I'm looking at this is 35 minutes of us just talking about combo spin. And we could probably keep going on, but I think the real lesson to take away is there's no real right way or wrong way of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's really fun, the creativity and just to see what happens.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that I like about it is it's a creative spark, you know, that then you can, like you have, sort of riffed on that several times. I think we all need that every once in a while.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for combo spin. And Kelly, anything else we need to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we've pretty much...
I think we've exhausted the subject for now.
Yeah, for now, till I have my yarn going.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see how yours turns out.
Too.
So, all right, I think we will say goodbye.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com. We have links for iTunes, Google Play Music, YouTube, and others.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2 Ewes
doing our part for World Fleece.